and again, we were going to talk about this. Finch might be a great coach for them. So some of their 5-out offensive stuff, we've talked about how bad their shot profile is, and how the shot profile looks good, but the execution isn't the best. And maybe they can unlock that with Ant and all those guys. But if you're Vanterpool, like what else can you do? And this is going to say this. Finch is an offensive guru, like you've talked about, right? So let's say this. He could be a really good coach. He could unlock a lot of stuff for Cat. If you're talking about a guy who's worked with big guys who have similar skill sets to Cat, and you're friends with the GM, totally makes sense that this would happen. However, this is only the second time in recent memory that we've had a coach leave a staff to go to another one. I think other examples like Lionel Hollins, who's a lifer, right? So that's to show you the exception. It's Lionel Hollins, who's been in the game longer than your parents have been.
Crooked hands or crooked fingers.
Yeah, right. Like he's literally one of the OGs in the league. So it's a little bit like he's paid his dues, right? And not to say Finch hasn't. And again, we were going to talk about this. Finch might be a great coach for them. So some of their 5-out offensive stuff, we've talked about how bad their shot profile is, and how the shot profile looks good, but the execution isn't the best. And maybe they can unlock that with Ant and all those guys. But if you're Vanterpool, like what else can you do as a black head coach? What else can you do? You go into the league, you work your way up. You work your way up from the back of the bench to the front of the bench. You pretty much helped build Dame and CJ, which Dame, if you read the tweet, Dame talked about, like he helped build that backcourt to where it was, where he literally taught Dame the ins and outs of how to lead a team. Goes to be the associate head coach in every other circumstance. That associate head coach becomes the head coach when the coach gets fired. He gets to finish the season, then they bring in their other guy. Or he impresses like he's Frank Vogel in Indiana or another intern coaches, and he gets the job himself.
Bigger staff, yeah.
Bigger staff, right? Or bigger staff in Cleveland, speaking of that, where he all of a sudden is like, this guy actually gets through it. Or he's an assistant like Nick Nurse, associate head coach. We fire a guy at the end of the offseason. We bring him in, right? And then Nurse, the rest is history for the Raptors. This is what happens. There's no other counter to this. Like you could say, hey, Omar, you just said Lionel Hollins, but again, not the same thing at all when you have a qualified black head coach. They don't get the same rights. And even Rick Carlisle from the Coach Association said this is troubling, right? This is not something we want as a president to be set, where a lot of these guys will come in and there's just like the black guys don't get to build those. Black coaches don't get to build those same relationships. Doesn't matter if they played in the league or not. And it's disgusting. And it's I feel bad for him. I feel really bad for Vanterpool just because it's like, what else are you supposed to do as a coach? Like you do everything the right way and are like, yeah, but we got a guy. Right. And could you have waited? Like, could you give Vanterpool the year and then hire Finch in the offseason? There's so many other things that went wrong there. And optically, it just looks bad on the league itself. And when your best players are like saying, like Kat saying he found out eating food with his dad, is not a good look. And I'm very pissed off about it. And I'm going to use the word pissed because I am.
Yeah, and that kind of speaks volumes to who Glenn Taylor is as an owner too, in terms of, ironically, SB Nation or Secret Base released a video talking about how, the whole KG situation, like you said, in terms of black athletes trying to have, you look at the grand scheme of things in terms of the impact. People know who KG is. People are not going to know who Glenn Taylor is unless you're one of his boys or you're in that upper echelon in terms of the finances or political nonsense. But to me, I think this just was the epitome in terms of how Minnesota's just been poorly constructed. And it's reflected in terms of how they've been able to put teams together because, we talked about Anthony Edwards. We talked about Kat. Him and D'Lo have only played 5 games together. And with how things are unfolding, if that pick, especially with Golden State trading for Wiggins, that pick could be a 4th or 5th pick. Those guys end up with Kuminga, one of those up-and-coming guys. And we sit here, we say, hey, it's Minnesota, man. They just do it. And that stuff, to me, that just resonates with the players and it resonates with – and people talk. Like, people are going to look at this and say, hey, man, like, we get it. Maybe, like you said, Chris Finch is a great coach, but we're going to be like, hell no, we don't want that job, or we don't want to, we're not going to support that, because as people of color, you deserve every opportunity based on your credentials. And clearly he wasn't even considered, like you said, because how do you just come up with a guy, and you can see the political side of them being friends playing a role in that.
So I mean, it's the back channels, right? How you fire a coach and hire an assistant right away, like literally means you had a deal in place. Like everyone knows is when players sign with other teams, it's not like they decided on July 1st. You know what I'm saying? They've already had these conversations. So these conversations have happened. So clearly they reached out to Finch or his representatives or the Raptors in some cases and been like, hey, this is going to happen, right? Like, or, they've talked to his agent or his manager and be like, hey, this, or they whisper to him, like, you sent me that interview of David West, right? And Bob Myers, after the Spurs lose to the Warriors, he literally tells him that day, like, yo, when it's ready. Like, he got in trouble for saying it, right? The same thing happened, right? But the thing is, black people don't get to be in those conversations. They don't get to, black coaches, they don't see enough of the value, and we don't get to be viewed as the strategists and the smart guys. We are the guys that are friendly with players, but they don't see the work and the time that goes into this, right? This is a separate conversation that has to actually, ironically, have to do with the Minnesota, with even this analytics stuff with Nate Duncan talking about the dunk, right? It's not about the analytics. It's about who gets to have these conversations. Because some of my favorite analytics guys are Nikias Duncan and Chris Herring, of who used to be on 538, and Zach Lowe. Those guys understand the game. But the thing is, who gets to tell these conversations? Who gets to hire the people? Who gets the shot? Who gets to be the black Chris Finch? We don't get to be that. They don't take shots on that. There's no black Sean McVay in football. And this is what I mean. We need to be very careful of not discriminating on information, but making sure that who gets to tell these stories and who gets to be part of the game that these players built. And I think that's the main takeaway from this, and that's why I'm so heated. And that's why I've been going off like Anthony Edwards on your boy Watanabe.
Yeah, but how does the league resolve this? Because obviously, we've had a discussion in terms of, like you said, it's reflective of how things are constructed. But how do they, with the Coaches Association, whatever the case is, how did they kind of incorporate? And people say, I hear Rooney Rule. That to me is all nonsense, because you look at the NFL, there's 3 or 4 black head coaches, and they've been talking about, like you said, guys like Sean McVay just vertically integrating after being a 32-year-old and getting a chance, while a guy like Bieniemy is just chilling, constructing the best offense arguably ever. But how do they resolve this?
You can put pressure on them, but it's the owners, right? It's that's the problem with the Rooney Rule, right? You're asking people to think outside of their social circles, and you're asking people to step out of themselves, and to look at people that aren't their friends, who they didn't go to dinner with, who they didn't go to college with, who they didn't go to Harvard Business School with, who they didn't, go and have the same country club, or somebody knows somebody, or, it's connections, it's networking. And these guys, unfortunately, the ruling class, the owner class of a lot of these leagues don't really have to ever get told what to do. And Silver can talk. What's he going to do? Find them? You can, right? They can find them, and guess what's going to happen? Chris Finch is going to coach the team. Vanterpool is not going to get his job. Mm-hmm. So you're really putting pressure on these owners. The players can maybe do something, boycott, but at the end of the day, it's power. Power concedes nothing without demand, so maybe there needs to be a demand from these players and from these owners, from these GMs. But again, like I said, it's about who covers the game, who gets to talk about the game, and who gets to lead the game, who gets to lead and control conversations. But that's all I got, man, because honestly, if I keep going, I'm just going to be mad, man.